They laughed when she began to dig. Not delicately, but with that drawn-out mockery of someone who sees someone insisting on the absurd. The woman who had returned alone to her family's land, the one who never said much, was digging her own house inside the hill. Not beside it, not with a common basement. Inside. As if she wanted to bury herself alive before life did it for her. The nickname came quickly. Mole. They said she was afraid of the wind, of the world, of her own shadow. They said that wasn't a house, it was a grave. And while the neighbours erected light-coloured wood under the sun, she continued to disappear into the dark earth, carrying concrete, adjusting angles, sealing entrances that no one understood. The paradox was simple and cruel. The person everyone thought was hiding from reality was the only one who truly saw it. The region was characterized by gentle hills and wide horizons, where the sky occupied more space than any building. The wind blew without hindrance, crossing wheat fields and pastures as if it owned everything. Spring storms arrived with force, but always passed. The houses were light, made of treated wood, with roofs sloping just enough to comply with the code. No one questioned it. It had always been this way. It had always worked. The community spread for miles. Families who had known each other for generations, accustomed to trusting tradition more than any external warning. They built quickly, repaired when necessary, and moved on. Excessive preparation was a sign of paranoia. Those who built too much were wasting time that could be spent producing. She didn't try to convince them of anything. Since returning, after a loss no one mentioned aloud, she kept enough distance not to bother them, but she was never accepted back the way she was before. There was always something out of place about her. Her choices were seen as strange, her worries exaggerated. When she announced she would rebuild the old family home, they expected a simple renovation. When they saw the excavations begin, the strangeness turned into a joke. She didn't react. She just kept digging, measuring, adjusting. The isolation was nothing new, the disbelief either. But this time, she wasn't just being ignored, she was being ridiculed, and that somehow made her dig deeper. The chosen hill was a short walk from the main road, covered in low grass and a few small trees that bent in the direction of the prevailing wind. The soil there was compact, with layers of clay and stone that required real effort to remove. It wasn't the easiest or most beautiful place, but it had enough slope to provide shelter without completely blocking the view of the valley. She studied the terrain for weeks before touching any tools, observing how rainwater ran off, where the wind blew strongest, how the sunlight shifted throughout the day. While her neighbours erected structures in 3 weeks, she spent months just planning where and how to dig. The difference between their methods couldn't be clearer. They built upwards, she dug inwards. The work was slow and solitary. Every cubic metre of earth needed to be removed, separated, analysed. She hired only a backhoe for the initial excavation, but all the refinement was done by hand. The inner walls of the excavation were carefully shaped, angled at specific angles to distribute pressure. There was no rush. There was no audience. Just her, the shovel, the heavy silence of the damp earth, and the smell of exposed roots. The metallic sound of the tool against the stone echoed across the empty hillside. Her hands grew calloused, Her back ached at the end of the day, but every inch gained had a purpose. She wasn't building just any shelter. She was creating a structure that the earth would support, not one that would fight against it. The community drove by, slowing down just to watch. Some shook their heads. Others commented amongst themselves, their voices low but audible enough for her to perceive the tone. "It looks like he's digging his own grave," someone said. "It'll flood with the first rain," predicted another. "When the roof collapses, nobody will even know where to look for the body," ventured a third. She listened to everything without responding. There were no arguments that could change minds already closed. The difference between her and the others wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. They believed that nature should be confronted with height, visibility, apparent resistance. She believed that nature should be respected, accommodated, used as an ally. Two incompatible worldviews, separated by meters of excavated earth. Inside the house under construction, the temperature was always more stable. In the scorching summer, the interior of the excavation remained cool. In winter, it retained heat with surprising efficiency. The humidity, which everyone predicted would be a fatal problem, was controlled by carefully positioned drainage channels, directing water away from the structure before it could seep in. She installed discrete ventilation pipes, almost invisible from the outside, which allowed air circulation without creating vulnerable pressure points. Every technical decision came from observation, not from a manual. She didn't follow patterns because patterns were made for houses that defied the environment, not for houses that integrated into it. Social isolation deepened as the project progressed. Invitations to community meetings stopped arriving. Casual conversations at the market became shorter, more formal. She wasn't openly harassed, but she was treated as someone who had given up on belonging. The nickname Mole stuck with unexpected force. Children repeated it without understanding. Adults used it with barely disguised irony. She became an example of what not to do, living proof of how irrational fear wastes resources. Meanwhile, her house continued to grow into the earth, taking shape in layers invisible to the hurried eye. The contrast was evident. The more solid the structure became, the more fragile her position in the community seemed. The more she prepared for the worst, the more convinced they became that she had lost her mind. The decision to excavate wasn't impulsive. She spent months researching ancient structures, underground shelters, construction techniques that used the earth as a shield instead of an obstacle. She studied how people in arid regions built semi-buried houses to escape extreme heat, how military bunkers distributed structural load through mass instead of point resistance. The logic was crystal clear. Wind doesn't destroy what it can't push, and it can't push what's anchored by tons of compacted earth. But when she tried to explain this to the local builder, she was met with a condescending look. "That might work in the desert or a war zone," he said. "Here we build properly." The word properly carried all the weight of custom, tradition, of what had always been done. Anything outside of that was wrong by definition. The community's reaction was not silent. In church meetings, in conversations at the gas station, in casual encounters on the street, the project became a recurring topic. Some expressed feigned concern. What if you get trapped in there during a storm? Others were direct in their criticism. You're throwing money away instead of building something worthwhile. There were even those who suggested she should sell the land and return to the city, where this kind of crazy idea would make more sense. The message was clear, repeated in subtle but consistent variations. She was making a mistake, a costly, laborious, and potentially fatal mistake. No one forbade her from continuing, but everyone made sure to record that they had warned her, that they had tried to show her the right path, that the responsibility would be exclusively hers. The risk perceived by the community was threefold. First, structural. The belief that excavated earth eventually collapses, that concrete walls cracking under lateral pressure are inevitable, that drainage systems fail and turn basements into swimming pools. Second, practical. The idea that maintenance would be impossible, that any repairs would require additional excavation, that the resale value would be zero. Third, social. The silent fear that, if she were right, everyone else would be wrong. This last one was the most dangerous. It wasn't just about safety or economics. It was about admitting that generations had built inadequately, that trust in tradition can be trust in vulnerability. Easier to ridicule the exception than to question the rule. She absorbed everything without confrontation. When someone pointed out flaws in the project, she simply nodded and continued working. When specific disasters were predicted, she mentally noted them down and checked if there was anything that needed adjusting. External resistance didn't make her doubt herself, but rather made her more meticulous. Every criticism was transformed into a test. If they said it would flood, she reinforced drainage. If they said it would collapse, she increased the thickness of the retaining walls. If they said it would be too dark, she planned strategic openings that allowed light in without creating weak points. The project became more robust, not despite the opposition, but because of it. Every taunt was a reminder that failure would confirm all the negative predictions. The moment of greatest social tension came when she began installing the interior doors. They were heavy structures with multiple seals, designed to create isolated compartments within the house. A neighbor who passed by saw it and spread the news. She's locking herself in there alive. When something happens, no one will be able to help. The narrative subtly shifted. Before, it was about waste. Now it was about real danger. They began to treat her not only as eccentric, but as someone who needed to be protected from herself. There was talk of contacting some authority, checking if the construction followed minimum codes. Nothing progressed officially, but the social pressure reached its peak. She was completely alone in her decision, and everyone around her waited, with a mixture of concern and anticipated satisfaction, for the moment when she would realize her mistake. Preparation began before dawn and ended after natural light had completely disappeared. Each step demanded precision that allowed no haste. First, the reinforcement of the excavated walls. She applied layers of concrete in sections, allowing for proper curing before proceeding. The mixture was specific, with additives that increased moisture resistance and structural flexibility. It wasn't ordinary construction concrete. It was a formulation she herself adjusted after testing samples under similar conditions of pressure and infiltration. The walls weren't perfectly smooth. They had an irregular, almost organic texture, following the natural contours of the excavation. Each irregularity was intentional, distributing the load unevenly to avoid points of stress concentration. The smell of damp cement permeated everything, mixed with the earthy odor of exposed clay. The drainage channels were invisible once completed, but their installation took weeks. She dug trenches around the entire perimeter of the structure, positioning perforated pipes wrapped in geotextile fabric. The system worked by gravity, directing any seepage to outlets far from the house. She tested each section by manually pouring water, observing the flow and speed of drainage. Where she found slowness, she adjusted the slope. Where she noticed accumulation, she repositioned the pipes. The soil around the channels was compacted layer by layer, never all at once, to avoid uneven settling. It was tedious, dirty work that left her clothes heavy with mud. But when she finished, she was sure that water would never be a problem. The land could withstand torrential rain. The house would remain dry. The entrances were designed at a downward angle, never straight. The idea was simple. Wind entering in a straight line gains strength. Wind that has to curve loses energy. She created a main entrance that descended in a gradual spiral with 3 sequential doors, each sealing the space before it. Between the doors, small compartments functioned as decompression chambers. If external pressure increased drastically, it would be distributed through these chambers instead of forcing a single barrier. The doors were made of reinforced steel, but the secret lay in the hinges and latches. She installed multiple latches, distributed along the entire edge, so that no single point would bear the full force of a possible impact. The hinges were of an industrial model, designed to withstand weight far greater than that of the doors. Lubricating oil dripped from the hinges, a metallic reflection against the dim light that entered through the still unfinished openings. Ventilation was the most complex technical challenge. Air needed to circulate, but openings couldn't be weak points. She installed inverted L-shaped ducts, with inlets positioned at the top of the hill, above the line where the wind usually blew strongest. The ducts descended through the earth to the structure, making curves that prevented direct entry of water or debris. Inside the house, air was distributed by grills positioned near the ceiling of each room. The system was entirely passive, without mechanical fans. It worked by natural temperature and pressure differences. When she first tested it, placing incense near the grills, she saw the smoke being gently drawn upwards, indicating constant circulation. The air inside the house was fresh, without the musty smell everyone had predicted. It was almost like breathing outside air, but filtered by the earth. The roof structure demanded a different solution. It wasn't a traditional roof. It was the hill itself. She reinforced the top layer of earth with geogrid, a synthetic material that distributed weight and prevented erosion. On top of the geogrid, she replanted native grass, which would take root and hold everything in place. From the outside, the hill seemed untouched. Only small, discrete elevations marked where the ventilation ducts emerged, easily mistaken for natural rocks. The weight of the earth on the structure was immense, but it was precisely this weight that guaranteed stability. The more earth, the more anchoring. The more mass, the less chance of displacement. She calculated everything: soil thickness, concrete load-bearing capacity, weight distribution per square meter. The numbers confirmed what her intuition already told her. The house wouldn't withstand the wind. The house would ignore the wind. Internally, the spaces were smaller than conventional houses. but sufficient. A central room with a slightly vaulted ceiling, 2 side bedrooms, a compact kitchen, and a bathroom with its own septic tank system. There were no traditional windows. Light entered through small skylights, positioned at angles that prevented direct rain from entering. During the day, natural light was sufficient. At night, low-energy LED lamps, powered by a small diesel generator stored in a ventilated external compartment, provided light. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't spacious, but every inch had a clear function. There were no decorative excesses, just silent functionality, tested and approved by months of solitary work. She stockpiled basic supplies in a sealed compartment near the kitchen. Water in 20-litre jugs, non-perishable food, a first aid kit, a battery-powered radio, flashlights, extra batteries. These weren't provisions for an apocalypse. They were provisions for a week without outside access, enough to wait out any storm, any blocked road being cleared. The organization was methodical. Each item had a specific, labeled place, easily accessible even in the dark. She tested finding things blindfolded, measuring how long it took to locate what she needed by touch alone. Less than 10 seconds for any essential item. The preparation wasn't paranoia. It was the elimination of variables. When it was finally finished, months after it began, the house was complete but invisible. From the road, no one would know there was recent construction there. The hill looked exactly as before, perhaps even greener where replanted grass grew vigorously. Only those approaching on foot would notice the discreet entrance, almost hidden among stones and low vegetation. She spent the first night inside, lying in the profound silence that only the surrounding earth provides. No creaking of wood, no whistling of wind through cracks, just thick, almost tangible silence, occasionally interrupted by the distant sound of her own breathing. The feeling wasn't of being buried, it was of being protected. But outside, the community continued laughing, continued waiting for the day when that mole would realize it had dug too deep. The first climate changes were subtle, easily overlooked by those who weren't paying attention. Spring arrived wetter than usual, with heavy clouds lingering longer over the region. Weather forecasts mentioned increasing atmospheric instability, cold fronts colliding with warm air masses in unusual patterns. Nothing alarming yet, just numbers on graphs that most people didn't consult. She noticed. She checked forecasts daily, compared them to previous years, observed how the sky changed colour faster in the afternoons, how the wind had more erratic gusts. Small storms began to appear without warning, lasting only a short time, but arriving with surprising intensity. Dry thunderstorms illuminated the night horizon. Air pressure changed rapidly, causing headaches for some residents. Something was different, but still within the controllable spectrum. The first significant storm arrived on a Tuesday without proper warning. The sky darkened in minutes, turning midday into an artificial twilight. Wind blew with enough force to tear branches from older trees, scatter tools left in yards, and knock down barbed wire fences. Rain fell diagonally, almost horizontally, pounding against wooden walls with an irregular machine gun-like sound. It lasted 20 minutes. When it passed, it left minor but visible damage. Displaced tiles, torn gutters, cracked windows. Nothing catastrophic, nothing to justify panic. People repaired what broke, reinforced what loosened, and moved on. In the excavated house, she didn't even notice when it started. She heard the muffled sound of the rain outside, felt a slight change in pressure, but nothing more. Everything remained dry, stable, untouched. Weather alerts began appearing more frequently. Notifications on cell phones, warnings on local radio, brief mentions at community meetings. Storm season more active than average. Possibility of severe events. Stay informed. The language was careful, technical, avoiding unnecessary alarm. The community reacted with a mixture of attention and skepticism. Some checked roofs, bought extra tarps, cleaned gutters. Others remembered that there were similar warnings every year and rarely anything serious happened. The belief that it's always been this way remained firm. Storms came, storms went. Houses suffered minor damage. Insurance covered the necessary expenses. Life went on. Excessive preparation continued to be seen as wasteful. She, meanwhile, tested the locks on the interior doors for the third time that week. Small problems began to appear more regularly in traditional homes. Leaks in roofs that were once solid. Windows that wouldn't close properly after being forced open by the wind. Foundations that began to show tiny, almost invisible cracks that hadn't existed before. Nothing serious in isolation, but the frequency increased. Homeowners spent weekends making repairs that were previously only needed once a year. Conversations in the local market changed tone. Fewer jokes about the weather, more complaints about maintenance. Some commented on hiring inspectors to check structural integrity. Others considered upgrades to basement drainage systems. Confidence didn't disappear, but it began to crack. Very slowly, like glass under increasing pressure, the atmospheric tension was becoming physically perceptible. The air seemed denser, more charged. Animals reacted strangely, cattle huddled together in corners of pastures, birds flying in erratic patterns. She felt it on her skin, literally. Static electricity increased, small shocks when touching metal doorknobs, hair standing on end for no apparent reason. She checked all the house's systems again. Drainage working, ventilation operating, doors sealing perfectly, supplies complete, generator tested, everything ready, not for anything specific, but for whatever was coming. Outside, the sky continued to change. Clouds formed faster, with more defined edges, darker colours. The horizon never seemed completely clear. There was always something forming somewhere, and the community continued to live as if nothing was changing, as if extra preparation were a sign of weakness, not prudence, as if the land beneath their feet were an eternal guarantee, not a temporary variable. She knew otherwise, and she waited, silently, for what the numbers and the sky already indicated was on its way. The alert came 3 days earlier. It wasn't a generic notification. It was a specific warning with coordinates, estimated times, and risk classification. A severe storm system was forming over the region, with significant potential for tornadoes. The meteorologist's technical language became more direct. Seek safe shelter. Avoid lightweight structures. Prepare for winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. The numbers were clear, but the reaction was fragmented. Some took it seriously immediately, emptying supermarket shelves, filling fuel tanks, and revising emergency plans. Others maintained defensive skepticism, remembering that forecasts rarely hit the mark, that maximum alerts usually resulted in moderate storms. The community was divided between preparation and denial. It didn't divide. It checked everything one last time and waited. The first 48 hours were filled with growing anxiety. The sky held a strange greenish hue, a colour veterans recognized as a sign of real danger. Wind blew in increasingly strong gusts, changing direction unpredictably. Temperatures dropped rapidly, then rose again, then fell again. Atmospheric pressure fluctuated so wildly that analog instruments struggled to track it. Some families decided to leave, driving to larger cities where concrete buildings offered more reliable refuge. Most stayed. They reinforced windows with boards, locked doors, and moved light furniture down to basements. Confidence that the house would hold still prevailed. After all, generations had lived there. Storms always passed. This one would too. She watched the traffic on the road from inside her almost invisible driveway, seeing cars pass with luggage strapped to their roofs, children looking out the back window with confused expressions. The day dawned with deceptive clarity. The sun rose cloudless, the sky clear blue, the temperature pleasant. It seemed like an implicit cancellation of all warnings. Some people relaxed, joked about alarmist meteorologists, and returned to their normal routines. But those who understood the weather knew that this calm was a symptom, not a cure. It was the moment before the system arrived, when warm, humid air fills the space that would soon be occupied by a violent cold front. Around midday, the first clouds appeared on the western horizon, small, dark, forming too quickly. In 2 hours, they covered half the sky. In 3 hours, they blocked the sun completely. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 15 minutes. The wind began to blow steadily, without gusts yet, just continuous pressure coming from an unusual direction. The smell of the air changed, acquiring a metallic odor that precedes extreme electricity. The first rains arrived like a solid curtain, reducing visibility to just a few meters. It didn't just fall, it poured down. Streets turned into shallow rivers in minutes, urban drainage systems immediately overwhelmed. Lightning cut across the sky without pause, illuminating the landscape in strobe flashes. Thunder wasn't a separate sound, but a continuous roar, a vibration that shook windows and made loose objects tremble on surfaces. The wind increased to levels that began to cause visible damage. Thick branches broke. Small trees bent until they touched the ground. Roof tiles began to fly, not one or two, but dozens, ripped off in sequence like playing cards blown from a table. Some houses lost entire sections of their roofs, exposing their interiors to the torrential rain. Residents rushed to cover what they could, but wind and rain made outdoor movement dangerous. Decisions had to be made. Inside or outside, stay or run. It was then that the sky took on a hue that clung to no optimistic interpretation. Dark green, almost black at the base of the lowest clouds, with swirls visible even from afar. The roar changed in quality, transforming into a sound that seemed to come from within the earth, a deep vibration that made the ground tremble slightly. Alerts sounded on all cell phones simultaneously, a high-pitched emergency tone that could not be silenced. Tornado confirmed. Seek shelter immediately. It was no longer a forecast. It was present reality, a funnel descending from the clouds a few kilometers away, visible through the rain as lightning illuminated its rotating shape. People who were still outside ran inside. Doors were locked. Families huddled in shallow basements, holding on to each other, listening to the sound outside grow until it seemed as if the world was being ripped from its foundations. The wind reached levels that transformed ordinary objects into lethal projectiles. Pieces of metal from roofs flew horizontally, embedding themselves in wooden walls like knives. Windows exploded even when protected, the differential pressure between the interior and exterior too great for the glass to withstand. Some houses began to creak audibly, wood flexing beyond its designed capacity, nails being slowly ripped from beams. The structure of a neighboring house partially collapsed, a side wall detaching and being sucked into the vortex. The sound of destruction was physical, palpable, making ears ache even with hands covering them. There was no longer any possible denial. There was no more trust in traditional methods, only pure terror in the face of a force that did not negotiate, did not forgive, did not care about traditions or human trust. Nature was demonstrating, without ambiguity, who was truly in command. It was at that moment that someone remembered the house on the hill. Not as a joke, as a real possibility of survival. An entire family, 5 people, ran out of a basement that was beginning to flood, wading through horizontal rain, battling winds that nearly knocked them down. They arrived at the excavated entrance soaked, terrified, banging desperately on the first door. It opened. It said nothing. It simply stepped aside, giving them space. They entered, descended the spiral ramp, passed through the second door, the third. Inside, the contrast was shocking. The roar of the tornado was still audible, but muffled, distant, as if it were happening in another world. There was no wind. There was no rain. Only relative silence, stable air, constant temperature. The children stopped crying almost immediately, confused by the sudden absence of chaos. The adults looked around, slowly processing that they were safe, that the earth above them was absorbing the fury that was tearing everything apart outside. More people arrived, then more. Neighbors who had mocked her now begged for entry. She didn't hesitate, didn't demand explanations, didn't require apologies. She simply opened the doors and let them in. 23 people ended up crammed into a space designed for one. Tight, uncomfortable, but infinitely preferable to what was happening above. Outside, the tornado passed directly over the hill. The roar reached an unbearable peak, a vibration so intense that some felt nauseous. But the structure didn't move. It didn't creak. It didn't give way. The tons of earth above them were an anchor that no force of wind could move. The reinforced concrete walls distributed lateral pressure without cracking. The drainage worked perfectly, channeling seeping water away even under extreme volume. The sequential doors held, multiple latches distributing force without a single point of failure. Everything that had been ridiculed, every detail called excessive, every choice seen as paranoia, was now keeping almost 24 people alive while the world above them was rewritten by the violence of the moving air. Within that stifling silence, no one spoke. They breathed deeply, held hands, closed their eyes, and waited. The mole that everyone had ridiculed stood calmly, checking the pressure gauges he had installed, making sure the systems were still functioning. His face showed neither satisfaction nor resentment, only the serene concentration of someone who had done what needed to be done and now saw the exact result of the plan. Outside, houses were reduced to rubble. Inside, life continued, protected by meters of earth that most considered a grave. The paradox was complete. What seemed like death was life. What seemed like weakness was strength. And everyone inside knew, without needing to say it, that they would never see that woman, that decision, that house, in the same way again. Silence gradually fell. First, the roar of the wind lessened in intensity, losing that otherworldly quality that made the air seem solid. Then, the rain began to lessen, its pounding against the earth above becoming less frantic, less continuous. Thunder subsided, the intervals between lightning flashes lengthening until natural light began to filter through the discrete ventilation openings. Inside the makeshift house, no one moved yet. They awaited confirmation that it was truly over, that it wasn't just a temporary pause before a second wave. She checked the battery-powered radio, tuning to a local station. The broadcast returned, the announcer's trembling voice confirming that the tornado had passed, that the worst was over, that emergency teams were being mobilized. Only then did the tension begin to ease. Breaths deepened. Some began to cry silently, releasing accumulated fear. Others simply remained still, processing the fact that they were alive and whole. The first person to speak was an older man, one of those who had been most vocal in ridiculing the project. His voice came out rough, broken by emotion he clearly struggled to control. "I need to see my house," he said, not as a demand, but as an urgent need to confront reality. She nodded, beginning to open the sequential doors. The process was slow, each lock needing to be released in the correct order, each door opening only after the previous one was completely sealed again. Protocol that had seemed excessive before now made perfect sense. When finally the last door opened, revealing the ramp leading outside, late afternoon light streamed in, golden and soft, contrasting violently with the recent memory of green darkness and chaos. One by one, they began to ascend, moving slowly, almost fearful of what they would find. The contrast was brutal, beyond the ability of words to adequately describe. The hill where the house was embedded remained intact, the grass slightly flattened by the wind, a few small stones displaced, but structurally identical to what it had been before. 10 meters beyond, the devastation began. Trees uprooted, some still with soil clinging to their exposed roots, others broken in half, splinters of wood scattered like toothpicks. Houses reduced to irregular piles of rubble, impossible to distinguish where one building ended and another began. Vehicles overturned, some dozens of meters from where they had been parked. Fallen electricity poles, wires tangled on the wet ground. Heavy silence, broken only by the dripping of water from destroyed surfaces and, occasionally, the creaking of metal adjusting under its own distorted weight. The older man walked to where his house had stood. It was gone. Only the concrete foundation remained, with a few pipes emerging from the ground like exposed bones. Everything else had simply vanished, carried by the wind to unknown places. He stood there, staring at the emptiness where 3 generations of his family had lived. His hands trembled. He turned, looked back at the hill, at the almost invisible entrance on the slope, at the woman standing there, silently watching. The words were slow to come out. When they did, they were simple, direct, devoid of pride. "You were right. We were wrong." It wasn't an elaborate excuse. It wasn't a justification. It was pure recognition of a reality that could no longer be denied. Others around nodded, some verbalizing agreement, others simply lowering their heads. The collective pride, that unwavering certainty in traditional methods, had been ripped away as completely as the roofs of their houses. If you've ever experienced something that no one believed possible until it happened, subscribe to the channel. These stories need to be shared, and your subscription helps us continue bringing you stories like this. The following hours were filled with constant and organized movement. Emergency teams arrived, but roads blocked by debris delayed access to the most affected areas. Cell phone communication was intermittent, damaged towers limiting coverage. The excavated house became a natural meeting point, not by planning, but out of necessity. It was the only structure for miles that remained fully functional. She didn't openly assume leadership, but her actions established rhythm and organization. She distributed water from stored jugs, rationing it to ensure it lasted until outside help arrived. She provided non-perishable food for families with young children. She made her battery-powered radio available as an information center, keeping everyone updated on the regional situation. The generator was only turned on when absolutely necessary, fuel economy being a clear priority. Every decision came from prior preparation, from having thought through scenarios before they became reality. Injuries began to appear. Nothing critical, but deep glass cuts, severe contusions from impacts, a possibly fractured arm. The first aid kit she kept was opened, revealing supplies far beyond the basics. Sterile gauze, bandages of different sizes, antiseptics, analgesics, improvised splints. A woman with nursing training took over treatments under the light of LED flashlights, working with silent efficiency. Each wound was cleaned, treated, bandaged. Nothing that would replace a hospital, but enough to stabilize until proper medical transport arrived. The organization of the space, which had previously seemed claustrophobic, now showed its logic. Separate compartments allowed for isolating the injured, providing minimal privacy, maintaining order. What seemed excessive was, in fact, exactly what was needed. Children needed special attention. They were scared, confused, some entering a state of silent shock. She found paper and pencils in her supplies and offered them something to draw. A simple activity, but effective in distracting young minds from recent trauma. While adults dealt with the practical reality of the destruction, children drew houses, trees, suns. Some drew the tornado, releasing fear through dark scribbles and spirals. Others drew the hill, the entrance to the earth, the place where they were safe. One little girl drew the woman who opened the doors, adding flowers around the figure, transforming the savior into something almost mythical. There were no heroes there, only people doing what was necessary. But for those children, at that moment, the difference between necessity and heroism was irrelevant. Sometimes the preparation feels like loneliness until it becomes salvation. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Knowing that these stories reach people in different places keeps this work alive. Night fell over the transformed landscape. Without electricity, darkness was complete except for occasional beams of flashlights cutting through the blackness. The temperature dropped rapidly, the post-storm air bringing a damp chill that penetrated soaked clothes. People who had lost everything shivered, more from shock than from the temperature. She distributed blankets she had stockpiled, not many, but enough for the most vulnerable. She organized shifts so everyone could rest, even in cramped spaces. Some slept sitting up, leaning against concrete walls that hours before they had considered their graves. Others remained awake, staring into nothingness, processing their loss. Conversations were rare, whispered, fragmented. My house. Everything we had. How will we rebuild? Questions without immediate answers. Only shared presence, collective survival serving as minimal solace. When the first lights of emergency vehicles finally appeared on the main road, relief was palpable. Paramedics arrived, taking over treatment of the injured. Rescue teams began a systematic search for possible victims in the rubble. Authorities established a perimeter, initiating damage assessment. The house on the hill was registered as an improvised refuge point, noted in reports as an example of a structure that held up when others failed. Engineers would come later, wanting to understand how and why. But at that moment, the focus was on people, not on technology. Families were transported to temporary shelters in a neighboring town. The more seriously injured were taken to hospitals. Gradually, the excavated house emptied, returning to the silence that was its natural state. Before leaving, several people stopped at the entrance, looking back. They didn't know exactly what to say. Gratitude seemed insufficient. Apologies for past mockery seemed out of place amidst the present tragedy. So they said simple things. Thank you. You saved us. We will never forget. She responded with nods, few words, maintaining the discretion that had always been her nature. She didn't seek recognition. She didn't need validation. The fact that everyone was alive was validation enough. One by one, they left, leaving footprints in the mud that covered what had once been a road, walking among debris illuminated by lanterns towards an uncertain future, but breathing, moving, alive. When everyone had left, she remained. She walked around the perimeter of the hill, checking if the storm had caused any invisible structural damage. She found small displacements of surface soil, nothing that compromised its integrity. The ventilation ducts remained functional. Drainage worked perfectly, having already processed and expelled all the infiltrated water. The house had done exactly what it was designed to do, not by luck, not by miracle, through a correct understanding of the forces involved, through respect for physics and nature, through meticulous preparation that transformed theory into reality, tested under extreme conditions. She went back inside, closed the sequential doors, and for the first time in hours, stood alone in the profound silence of the earth. She lay down in the same spot where she had spent the first night after the construction was finished. The silence was identical, but the meaning had completely changed. Before, it was a silence of isolation, of being the only one who believed in something everyone else dismissed. Now, it was a silence of confirmation, of knowing that every hour of work, every ridiculed choice, every detail considered excessive had served a precise and crucial purpose. There was no selfish satisfaction in it, only serene recognition that preparation is not paranoia when it is based on a real understanding of risk. The difference between surviving and perishing was not in courage or strength. It was in respecting reality as it is, not as we want it to be. And that night, under meters of earth that protected her when the sky became the enemy, she finally slept without the weight of doubt or judgment. Only honest weariness from a job completed and lives preserved. The following weeks brought changes that no speech or argument could have produced. Reconstruction began, but it no longer followed the same patterns. Homeowners consulted engineers on how to incorporate earth into new projects. Some opted for deep, reinforced basements, others for partially buried structures following a model similar to the one they had previously ridiculed. The local builder, the one who had said she wasn't building right, appeared at the entrance to the hill one afternoon, hat in hand, asking to see how the drainage had been installed. She showed him without resentment. She explained angles, materials, the logic behind each choice. He wrote everything down in a worn notebook, asking technical questions, admitting gaps in his own knowledge. The conversation didn't mention the past. It focused only on the future, on how to build better, safer, with respect for the forces the region would face again. The nickname Mole disappeared completely from the local vocabulary. When they referred to her now, they used her name. Simple as that. Basic recognition of humanity that should always have existed. Regional authorities documented the house as a case study. Inspectors came, measured, photographed, and interviewed. Technical reports were produced, highlighting how the integrated design offered superior protection compared to conventional structures. It didn't become a mandatory requirement. Regulations didn't change overnight, but recommendations were updated. New building codes began to include sections on low-profile structures integrated into the terrain as a valid option for high-risk zones. It wasn't a revolution. It was a slow evolution of collective understanding, learning bought at the high price of destruction and near tragedy. The community didn't celebrate the woman who predicted the disaster, but it stopped ignoring her. It stopped assuming that different meant wrong, and that, in a way, was more significant than any temporary celebration. She continued living in the excavated house, her life following the discrete rhythm that had always been hers. She didn't give interviews, didn't accept invitations to speak about disaster preparedness, didn't capitalize on being right when others were wrong. The validation that mattered didn't come from external recognition. It came from knowing that, when tested under maximum pressure, every choice she made worked exactly as it should. On clear afternoons, she would sit at the entrance to the hill, observing the reconstruction in the distance, seeing deeper foundations being dug, thicker walls being erected, drainage systems being installed with a care that hadn't existed before. The scar on the landscape gradually healed, but the memory remained. and with it, a subtle but irreversible change in how that community viewed preparedness, risk, and the relationship between human arrogance and natural indifference. Stories like this remind us that prudence is never a waste. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription helps bring more stories that need to be told.